Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I am your host, Hannah Chapman, and I have got a guest here today that I'm super excited to share with everyone. His name is Ryan McBurney, and he's the visionary founder of Liquid Breathwork and also the co-owner of Unearth Your Soul, where he has spent 6 years dedicating his life and teaching to understanding and honing his use of breathwork. And with that, he's developed a distinctive certification program that integrates the full spectrum of breathwork practices that really aim to enhance your living, create an optimal living experience and bring that into, especially for coaches, bring that into your work with clients as well. So Ryan, thank you so much for being here with me today. And I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more and just tell us, more about you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Hannah. And, everybody, thanks for tuning in. So a little bit more about myself. Yeah, grew up like super into sports and just like that was my identity, just like playing sports all throughout my life. My dad was a coach, played football in high school, went on to college to play football, and then ended up tearing my ACL a couple of times. And I think that was kind of this like ripping the blanket out from under me, like kind of my comfort zone of my identity, who I felt like I was. And then sports got kind of, taken away from me. And it was like, all right, well, now I'm on the journey to figure out who I really am and, maybe transition from one purpose to another. And that was, what I would say is fair to say my dark night of the soul, a few year, you know, experience journey. And then, really was like doing a lot of searching internally, externally, looking for something. And, went through a lot of different spiritual practices. In college, I took a lot of different religion classes, learned about Taoism, Hinduism, um, you know, really every religion out there a little bit, like even Sufism, kind of all these little small little sects of religion, and loved everything I was learning, but I didn't really ever feel like I had connected with that, spirit, source, God, whatever it was I was looking for. I felt like I was just connecting with the information intellectually and really liking it from that standpoint. And it wasn't until I did breath work for the first time that I just felt something click, and I just had this profound experience. I was watching this podcast, and it was Wim Hof on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he explained, all these amazing things he had done in his life, these world records, this, that, the other, how he used breath work to, get over the passing of his late wife. And then he explained how to do breath work. And I couldn't like pause the episode fast enough. And I just immediately laid down on my bed and was like, all right, I'm going to try this. And it was the most profound experience. And immediately I was just like, wow, how does the whole entire world not know about this? How have I never done this before? And, pretty early on, it was like, I can't wait to just share this with people. And I'd say breathwork's just become like a center point to my life and like, my new identity of who I feel like I am and why I'm here. So yeah, thanks for asking that question.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So there are like a couple of things that I want to tease open or share and resonate with. A couple of things that you said. First, when I went to college back in, oh gosh, must have been junior year. So like 2004, I think my junior year of college, I took a religions class, and I had been raised very conservative Christian. And by the time I was, like a junior, senior in high school, I was starting to like not agree with a lot of what I was hearing, and was starting to like just deconstruct that on my own already. By the time I was a later teenager, but that year when I took that religions course in college, that like sealed it for me. It was so funny. That, learning about more of the world's religions, and like you're saying, like there's so many. There are
Yeah.
so many religions, so many more than I ever understood that even existed. Um, and the one that like sticks out to me, like Zoroastrianism and Sufism and all of the mystic
Yeah.
religions, like we talked about some of that. And I was so intrigued and also like, oh yeah, there's not one right way. There
Right.
can't
Right.
there can't be.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny. So my major that I did was called interdisciplinary studies, and so you kind of just choose your own two areas of concentration. And I was like, well, marketing's pretty cool, and that was one of them. And then the other one was religious studies, and obviously, seemed a little bit counterintuitive, but it's just cool because I had the opportunity to take all these different classes, and then like the higher level classes that I took were like spirituality 402, and it was like, all right, what have you learned in all these religious studies? And there's a cool opportunity to just see kind of like what you're saying is there's no right or wrong answer. And, you know, in the like esoteric sense, all of these religions are really saying the same thing at the core of it all, and then
Mhm.
the like the game telephone, it kind of gets misconstrued along the way of like what the current practices are, how people relate to them. But at the real essence of what's being said in the texts or in some of the teachings, it's like it's just connection to something greater than you, connecting to that within ourselves. So it was kind of a cool like realization to come to along the way.
Well, and that seems like absolutely perfectly suited for what you do now, right? Like, all right, here we go. The breath work and the marketing side to let people know how you do breath work,
Exactly. Yeah.
right?
I couldn't have planned it that way, but yeah, it turned out pretty well.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And then the other thing that you had also shared, that the intellectual knowing, right? That really resonated with me strongly too. I've been like I was feeling that for a long time as well. Like learning like feeling like up here in my head, I understand, or I think I understand what I believe, or have an intellectual understanding, but I'm not like not feeling it.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling that connection like in my body. Um or that like deep knowing, right? That feels like it's not up here in the head. It feels like it's deeper, right? And that was one of the things that I started to experience. And I had before we started recording, I mentioned a couple of like breathwork experiences that I've had that were super transformational for me. Like mind-blowingly, like, oh, this, having that what we call somatic, right? Experience, which I'll have you define that too, because I feel like that word is out
Yeah.
and about a lot now, but people maybe don't like, okay, I hear the word somatic all the time, but what does it mean? So I'll have you define that in a second. But that connection, the connection piece that you're talking about, like, okay, I'm not just intellectualizing this anymore. I'm feeling it. I'm understanding it. It's like a full body knowing instead
Yeah.
of a in my mind knowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I remember a concept from Buddhism, where they talk about experiential understanding, right? And I know they talk about this in Hinduism and many other religions as well. But it's, there can be the intellectual understanding, but until you really have been there to get that esoteric point of view of like really experiencing firsthand that relationship with God, source, universe, whatever, somebody wants to label that as, that's when you really know, right? And it's not just I think I know and I can explain it and I can regurgitate what I've read out of a book, but it's like, oh, now I can talk about something firsthand, how I relate to that thing. Yeah, I think that's like super important and just like really the essence of what spirituality is, right? And other than that, it turns into what you and I both experienced growing up. It sounds like you experienced the same as this exoteric, you have to go to church, there's these rituals and there's this, and I have to be a good boy or a good girl and go to heaven, all the things. And then it's just like try to follow the rules, and I don't know why I'm following them. But then it's like the deeper, the closer we can get to the core of everything, it's like then there's that understanding, like, oh well, it's because I want to be a good person and I want to be live right by myself and by that relationship with the divine. So yeah, I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think that for me was one of the things when I talk about, like it when I was a teenager, for sure, I was very set on following the rules, doing the right thing, right? All of that, like, and especially in youth group, God, went to like a summer camp, church camp over the summer, when I was in high school, and just seeing and hearing people from what my perspective then felt like complete hypocrisy. That was like how I could like connect to what I was seeing or hearing versus like, okay, here's what we're quote unquote supposed to be doing. And like everyone else here is doing something different. And I don't understand.
Yeah.
Right. Like it was such a, there was such a strong sense for me that like, okay, there's a right way to do something. You do it this way and you have to follow the rules. And so to have other people like breaking the rules, but then also being like the pastor's kid and I like I didn't get it. I didn't
Yeah.
get it. And that is not to put any judgment on anyone
Right.
in any way, shape, or form other than just to like illuminate like what my understanding was at that time was, yeah, you have to follow the rules, otherwise you're not doing it right.
Right.
Right. Like you said, it's completely outside of you, or the what you see on the outside is what
Hmm.
matters. And what I have grown up to, you know, find over the next, 2 decades of my life, um, it really is that internal connection. And that when I am connected to myself, when I feel like I am connected to the source of love, right? That to me, divinity, source, the universe, God, that to me is the source of love. And that's like the core essence of it that I can connect to. And so when I am connected to that, I can show up in. I can
Hmm.
show up in love. I can show up for myself in love. I can show up for my family in love. I can show up for others in love.
Yeah.
And that is spiritual connection in
Yeah.
my current understanding. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is a staple right there. And really, any spiritual practice, religious, whatever, you know, want to specify. But I think of Christ, right? And it's like growing up, I remember thinking like questioning it, is any of this real? And are these just stories and whatever it is? But, at the end of the day, and like I can now look at Christ and who that figure represents, right, is compassion, forgiveness, and like just being our highest essence, also still expressing and having emotions and being a human and like accepting that. And but then at the end of the day, forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, not holding these grudges and holding on to resentment. And like that's one of the biggest practices for me, over the last few years and right now, is just how do I let go of like these, like, oh, I'm better than this person, or they're a bad person because of this, and have those conversations in my head of what I would say to them. And it's like, instead of holding on to that energy, how do I move into compassion? Just like, what, a mentor of mine shared this with me. Anytime he's having thoughts about somebody and maybe noticing some judgment coming up, it's instead, yep, just like me. If I were born in their life, in their shoes, I would do the exact same thing, and or just like me in my life, I know I've done the same thing. And maybe that was 5 years ago, and maybe I've transformed and moved on to something else, but I've gone through that same experience, and I can now let go of that judgment of like, oh, that idiot, they're doing XYZ or whatever. They have this belief. It's like, well, maybe at some point I believed that. And instead of I know in probably the world at large, but especially in the US, like there's a lot of division, right? And that stems from the top down. But it's, so much more powerful to like, how can I relate to this person that maybe has different beliefs and like still see them as me, and still like have that love, coming back to that, where
Mhm.
it's like, what, it doesn't matter if we have kind of these disagreements on root levels, because like maybe at the end of the day we don't have those disagreements, right? At the root level of things, we do want the same things, and everyone wants safety and peace, and it kind of just gets complicated and things get muddled. But I think love is one of the most powerful things to come back to. And you know an easy place to start is internally, self-love and self-forgiveness, and just starting there and expanding from that practice, and letting that radiate out to others, and just holding that in our hearts, that positive vibration instead of negative. So yeah, no, a little rant right there, but I hope that was, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I just think it's so powerful to share our experiences and viewpoints and to open up, like the layers of who we are as people, right? That a lot of times where when we're talking about compassion, I feel like compassion is also one of my cornerstones, right? Love and compassion go together, but compassion is a little bit different. It expresses
Mhm.
differently. Um, and that sense of exactly what you said, like, yeah, I have been there before. I understand. Or to see the fear that someone is currently dealing with, right? And that's why they're either angry or lashing out or, you know, showing up in a way that you might initially judge, right? That's the compassion comes in to say, I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
Compassion leads to understanding. And so to like shift it back to especially to breath work, because this one of the experiences that I want to talk about that I didn't share yet. So this is a new story for you too. One of my really profound experiences with breath work um took me through a almost like a re-experiencing of the birth of one of my children, which was so profound and powerful. Um, and it was very interesting to me. So when we talk about like healing things, this is I feel like breath work has the ability to like to bring you into sync with things that need to be healed that you maybe didn't even know need to be
Hmm.
healed. And that was for me this particular experience. So like really super brief story. My first child, I have 3 kids. My oldest child, I'd wanted to have a natural birth in the hospital, no epidural, no pitocin. Wanted to, labor in the water. They don't allow you to birth in the water at the hospital, whatever. Like that was fine. Like I was figuring it out. And that birth ended up being very traumatic. Not natural pitocin. I didn't have a C-section, but um, we were close to needing that. And what happened was my daughter was asynclitic, so she was on her ear. So when a baby is coming down, the top of their head is supposed to be opening the cervix. Instead, she was on the side of her head on the ear, which does not put the right amount of pressure on. And so I wasn't dilating, I wasn't progressing the way I was supposed to be. And she ended up being fine. Everything was okay, right at the end of it. But for me, it was a traumatic experience
Hmm.
of,
Yeah.
of giving birth and feeling, yeah, just lots of feelings. My third child, so my second two, I ended up having them at home because that's what I desired. That's what I felt would be safer. I trusted my body. I trusted myself. And we had midwives and wonderful, wonderful support, prenatal care all the way through. And I did have my second child and my third child both at home. My third child, she was almost a mirror of the labor experience with my first.
Hmm.
And so it was very interesting. So like my story coming out of her birth, but it was successful and we were at home. She was born at home, everything was fine, we were safe, we were healthy. It was great, but it was long and it was hard and it was scary, and she was also asynclitic on her ear. And when I first came out of that, right, or even for years, I mean, she's almost 9 at this point, my youngest, I thought that was like kind of like a redemption story. Like it was just like my oldest birth, but we did it and it was at home and everyone was safe and it wasn't traumatic and all of that.
Yeah.
And so in this breath work session, for that theme, my youngest, her birth to be the thing that was coming up as needing to like allow myself to grieve again
Mm-hmm.
was so I was so surprised. I was not confused by it, but I was surprised that that's the thing that like I had so much emotion stored up around it that I hadn't expressed and hadn't
Yeah.
allowed myself to move through. And it was a big theme of that weekend that I did a lot of healing around. And so I would love for you to talk more about breath work. Like that's again, that's just
Yeah.
one of my experiences, but more like what do you see? What do people experience? What have
Yeah.
you experienced in that realm?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think one thing you mentioned earlier, I think would be great to kind of define here are two words of like somatic, and then trauma, right?
Mhm.
And let's like point that out for anybody who doesn't have that full understanding. Cause like you said, they're both words that get tossed around, right? Or like triggers, and there's so many words. And, they, I think are just more simple than a lot of people might understand or make them out to be. And stoma is body. That's all it is. And somatic of the body,
Mm.
right? So somatic therapy is therapy for the body, right? And often somatic movement, right? Or just moving energy somatically, right? Moving energy through the body, because trauma, energy, emotions all get stored in the tissues in the body, in the nervous system, right? That's where these responses come from, is the nervous system, right? That sympathetic response, fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest and relax, everything's okay. But, you know, the traumatic experiences where it's like life or death, like this is, I'm a mother, there's, I want to keep this child safe, bring them into the world. Like I can only imagine the amount of traumatic response that's happening there, because you had a child in you for 9 months growing, and it's just like, this is the most important thing of all time of my whole life. And so there's going to be so much emotion stored with that, even if we're not able to express it outward in that moment. You're trying to be strong, or trying to like, we're it's game time, we gotta make decisions, things like that. So then coming to like trauma, what exactly is that? It's like, there, it's really just a gradient or a spectrum, right? Of like, anything could be kind of labeled as trauma, right? It's like if somebody calls me stupid, that's like, I could have a traumatic response from that, where it's just like all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, everybody thinks I'm stupid. Everybody in the room's looking at me, and I'm just starting to build it up in my mind, and I'm feeling fight or flight in my body, and I'm having this whole response. And, someone else might get called stupid, and it's just like, I don't care. It doesn't even think about it for a second. And, two people could expect, have the exact same thing happen to them, and, two completely different experiences. And I'm reminded of a quote, which is, the same sun that melts wax dries mud, right? And so we can talk about that with trauma, triggers, or different breath techniques, right? Where like one breath technique might do something for somebody and do the opposite for somebody else. And, it all has to do with our traumas, our triggers, the wounds that we're going through, what our nervous system state has been throughout our life and at that time, and how's that day going. There's all these little subtleties that make pretty profound impacts and changes to what our experience is. But yeah, kind of just like staying on the example of childbirth and breath work specifically, it's like, um so there was a style of breath work, lots of different styles, different little techniques within them all. But at the end of the day, a lot of breath work is pretty similar. But there's a style called rebirthing, right? Rebirthing breathwork. And this was developed pretty much alongside another style called holotropic.
Mm-hmm.
And holotropic just means moving towards wholeness, right? And it's like, how do we kind of move through these traumas, these triggers, these wounds that we've had all throughout our life, including perinatal, right? During the time in the womb, during our childbirth. So whether you're a mother or, you were born, which everyone has been, right, at some point. So it's like when we do these really deep, long, powerful breathwork sessions, we're bringing up the traumas from the nervous system, the emotions that are stored in the body, even if they've been stored there since we were in the womb, and maybe something traumatic happened to our mother, and then that energy goes right to the child too. They're experiencing those emotions, that energy as well, those hormones, whatever it may be. So we can have experiences from then or from afterbirth, right? And it's even like talked about and theorized that we can work through trauma from like 9 generations deep, these things that get passed along from generation to generation that are in our psyche, stored in the body, because it's all about survival of the fittest. So we're passing things on to our children, even if it's not like things that we're aware of. But these are all types of things that can come up during breath work or any other modalities, especially somatic modalities. It really unlocks these things, unleashes them from the body, and then we start trying to process things. And it's like, well, wow, this is quite a bit coming up here. But I think birth is often one of those things where in the hospital, especially, probably so many births are a little traumatic, right? There's doctors everywhere. There's, really bright lights, and it's not that calming, soothing of an experience unless it is at home, which that's so amazing to hear. You had, I think you said 2
Yeah.
childbirths that way. And I've had a chance to learn from a few midwife breath workers, rebirthing breath workers that use rebirthing breath work throughout the pregnancy to get mothers to the point where it's not only pain free, but even orgasmic when they
Mm-hmm.
have give birth. So it's really, just something that I think, the world deserves to know about. And, it's so interesting because this has been happening for 50 plus years, where these types of modalities have been inching their way to the forefront. But I think we're kind of getting to a point where it's becoming more and more popular finally.
Oh, that is, man. Um, we could go on a whole tangent about that too, but finding the right kind of support system.
Yeah.
So if you're pregnant and planning to give birth and you want to, give birth outside of a traditional hospital setting, like there are so many amazing resources, and there are so many ways for that to be safe and cared for. And, I mean, I like to um, kind of think about the way women give birth all over the world as well. The way that we do it in America isn't the safest. It isn't the isn't doesn't lead to the best outcomes for mothers and babies. That's in the numbers. It's in the statistics. Um, and so, and in a lot of places, midwifery care is the standard, right? And it's because it's focused on someone who's super focused on just birth, and this is
Yeah.
how it goes. And I wanted to kind of bring in, it's like such an interesting, like multi-layered thing, because one of the areas, right, where we store things from past generations is through, like if we think about like you as a human existed within your grandmother as an egg inside your, like, so like all of our female lineage goes back, like our cells, our bodies, our DNA, right, was within our
Yeah.
grandmothers, and she
Yeah.
was within her grandmothers, right? So I mean, it's like not just this idea, or like again, not just the conceptualization or intellectualization of we can have trauma stored in our body from past generations. It's like, no, we literally are affected
Yeah, it's in the
by,
DNA.
yeah, by the DNA of our grandmothers and beyond. And I've actually heard recently that it actually passes down through the male line as well. Like the
Mm-hmm.
sperm can actually be affected
Yeah.
by for generations by things that happened. I think they've used the Irish potato famine as an example and a marker of like how many generations were affected by that one famine
Wow.
on both sides, right? And it's that it carries through for generations to come. So people our age could have to, have changes in their DNA from this thing that was many generations ago that you didn't live through, your parents didn't even live through, but your DNA has been shifted because of that. And
Yeah.
so talk a little bit more about, or I would love for you to share more about how breath work in particular. So what are some of the ways that you see this shifting for people? And I'll give one more like little example that I was surprised about the first time that I did like a more transformational, like deep breath work
Yeah.
session was like the rawness and the depth of the emotion that I was experiencing. And so like crying, we were encouraged to like there were people facilitating, which is also what you do too, right? Like in person, people facilitating, people helping
Mm-hmm.
to like move the emotion that's coming through, actually like move it through your body. And so it was very um active, I will say, which is it wasn't like just lay
Yeah.
down and breathe this way, right? Like it was not that. So tell
Yeah.
us more, yeah, but like how it works and what people are experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, it's really, to kind of just boil it down, just so anybody who's never heard of breathwork before, maybe never tried it and isn't that familiar, there's maybe, two different styles, right? There's like, uh, a 10-20 minute breathwork session. You do a few rounds with some breath holds, and it's like, oh, I feel good. I feel charged up, or, maybe I feel a little bit rested. It's like non-sleep deep rest effects where we feel like we just took a nice little nap. Whatever it is, there's these like little breathwork sessions we can do, and we're just biohacking. But then there's what you talked about, the really deep, powerful breathwork sessions that are transformational, and there's all these different names for it, right? But at the end of the day, it's really stimulating the nervous system, stimulating the body to move this energy to bring things up and out. Um, that can look countless different ways, from the outside. Me as a facilitator, I've seen exactly what you've mentioned there is big emotional releases, lots of expression, crying, the body tensing up. Um, but I've also seen it completely on the other side of the spectrum is relaxation, laughing, just like a small smile and like very barely any movement, and uh, I think people that come to my class, the space I hold is like it tends to be more of the relaxation. People are just like off on this deep journey. It's like they kind of leave their body for a little bit, and they'll come back and like, wow, like I don't even, that was an hour, that was an hour and a half. Like what, and it's like, I forgot I was here, and, maybe a lot of entrepreneurs come to class and like, that's the most relaxed I've felt in years, because like we're used to being go, 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 very in the mind, but breath work is something that is a somatic practice, gets us into the body, reconnects the mind and the body, really. And I like to say the breath is kind of the bridge between mind and body and spirit, bridges in spirit back into the body. Some people dissociate, some people, just get a little bit disconnected from whatever it is, that thing that's greater than us. But the breath is something that's really powerful that brings that back in. But so many different effects, benefits that we can have from breath work. And I think some of the most powerful, most popular ones are that emotional aspect, emotional release, processing emotions, letting those go, moving through it. um, I'd say probably in our society, especially in the US, it's like very masculine, right? It's like do figure the problems out, think about it, make it happen. How am I going to do X, Y, Z? And it's much less in the feminine of just like attracting and moving through life, flowing through life. But breath work kind of slows us down and balances that back out, into I can relax. It's safe to just like take a pause, like, all right, everything's good. Let's stop and smell the roses, come back to the present moment a little bit more, and then allow myself to feel what's going on in my body, come back to intuition, come back to all these things and reconnect in that way. So yeah, I would say, the emotional aspect is a big one, but then lots of different breathwork technique styles, and people just get whatever they need from it. So some people just want some clarity, right? They just feel a little bit all over the place. And a breathwork session can be really powerful for just getting somebody the clarity they need, getting them refocused, reconnected to, what is really important to them, or kind of unlocking like a creative block. There's so many little benefits like that I've heard from people as well. Like I did a one-on-one with a friend of mine, and uh, he has a company where they get like these legal cases and basically like sell them to other companies, and they don't work any of the cases, but they're a really pretty big company growing really fast, and there's a lot of business decisions to be made, and he doesn't know where he wants to take the company. We did a breathwork session together, and the whole time he's just laughing, just like felt so good, felt so free. And then after, he's like, man, I just got like this the answer to like where to take the business from here, and it's like it was just so clear, just like was able to really sort that out and get that clarity. It was pretty amazing to see, and very different from a lot of experiences that I see too.
Mm. It's such a good reminder. It's such a good reminder. And I love that. I talk about it in a lot of different settings, but that connection right there, you talked about, the masculine and the feminine. And I actually love that conversation. I have that conversation with lots of people, but that my feeling is always coming back into balance. That's always been how I feel about that as well. Like knowing that my, I have healthy masculine expression. I have healthy feminine
Yes.
expression, right? Like we are all whole beings with both dualities inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that thought of breath work being like a place where you can like come back into center and come back into balance and feel that balance between
Yeah.
the being and the doing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
you feel
I,
that.
I look at breath work as the simplest way to rebalance our masculine and feminine, and to achieve a little bit of balance, right? And then just like harmony with both sides. And if somebody's a little bit more feminine, kind of coming back into that. If they're more masculine, coming back into that and reconnecting to that, but while having both, of course. But with the breath, it's so simple in that the inhale, right, is this doing, right, and then there's this sigh of relief, and it's relaxing. It's and I always talk about that in my classes. We're doing the inhale and then letting the exhale happen. And it's just this seesaw, this back and forth of kind of just coming right back to balance of yin and yang.
Mm,
Every breath is back to balance with yin and yang, restoring that balance and that harmony. And sometimes someone's on a really powerful breathwork journey, and there's going to be more masculine breath, right? More yang. It's like very active, very powerful, very fast, and almost like aggressive, right? But then there's other times where it can just be this really soft, slow breath, and very gentle on the inhale and the exhale. And you can get to very similar places with either type of breath, and we're still going to get exactly what we need from that experience.
mm. Oh, I love that. And okay, I want to make sure we have enough time
Yes.
for you to share a little bit more about one. So your studio is in the Phoenix area, right? You're in Arizona. If
Mhm.
anyone's listening and is like, okay, I want to go in person and see, like, experience that, which I do. So I already shared that. Like
Yeah,
I'm from Arizona. When we go back and visit family, that'll be on my checklist to go hang out with Ryan.
absolutely.
Do some breath work. I love that.
Yeah.
And you also work to or have a certification to help coaches use this in their work with their clients as well. And so, in our last couple of minutes here, can you tell me a little bit more about that and then how people can, if they want to learn more about that, where do they go to find you and how
Yeah.
do they go through those next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now everything's Master My Breath. So if anybody wants to connect on Instagram, type in Master My Breath. That'll pull up my personal and my business page. But then also my website, mastermybreath.com. And that has the schedule for in-person classes. You can find those there. There's also um, the link if anybody wants to learn more about the practitioner program, as you mentioned. So I'll touch on that more. But there's also a separate link where if somebody just wants to do more breath work, they want to try it out. I have a virtual membership that's a free 30 days. So people can try it out, just do some breath work, get some free audios every Thursday night. So tonight is our next class. Every Thursday night, we do a 45-minute breathwork session virtually so people can try it from the comfort of their own home, plug on some headphones, lay on their mattress, and just go into the breath. Um, but yeah, the thing I'd say most passionate about is doing those live in-person sessions. I love doing those, whether it's masterminds or retreats or birthday parties. We do things like that, bachelorettes, a lot of great experiences. And uh, that's kind of what I teach people to do inside of my certification program. Is someone might be a yoga instructor, or they host retreats, or they're a somatic coach or a life coach, anything like that. And it's just lending all the 6 years of experience that I've had and learning from people who have been teaching for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Dan Brulé is one of the people I've studied under, and he has been teaching breathwork for 50 years. And it was incredible to learn from him. And now I just feel like this calling to pass that information on so that people can use that with their students, the people they're working with, and really expand the reach of this, life-changing work, and just expand that positive ripple out into the world. And really done, spent the last couple of years just developing my style of breathwork, which is, it's not one approach, it's not one style, it's not one technique. Here's all of the techniques, all of the components, the pieces that all the tools that you could have on your belt, all the pieces that make up all the techniques. So you have all that at your disposal as you work with people, and then you can use those in the right moment to really help people move through their experience in whatever way they need to. Because it's not a one size fits all, that's, I think, true with anything. And we really need to develop that like intuitive approach that's really being there with somebody in the present moment, and kind of just being that witness consciousness and letting our intuition guide us, our divinity guide us, staying tuned into that. So I talk a lot about that, and not just, all right, here's the technique, teach people to do this and that's it. It's, let's really go on in that inner journey and, get ourselves to that highest self, and then share this work with others and continue to develop that as we work with people. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing. And I have to say, if any of my friends did a breathwork birthday party, I'm like 100% I'll be there.
Yes,
That
yeah,
sounds
absolutely.
so good. Um, or sound healing too, which I know if you look at like your
Yep.
website, right, you incorporate sound healing into a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah, we
that as
do
well. Oh,
breath work, reiki, and sound healing. Kind of, we do the trifecta.
oh,
So
so beautiful. I can just imagine like yeah, clear and light and that feels afterwards. Oh, so good.
absolutely.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being here today and sharing and yeah, just talking about the power of breath work and all of the nuances that come along with that. It was so good to have you. And if anyone has any questions or wants to know more, all of those links that you talked about will be in the show notes, super easy to get to. And for anyone who has any other questions, anything else that comes up, if you want to hear from Ryan again, like let me know. Send me your comments, send me your questions to Hannah at expansiveceo.com. Because that's how we continue to just grow and make sure that the things that we're talking about are really resonating for you. So thank you again. And I will absolutely let you know when I'm in Phoenix so we can do some breath work.
Amazing. Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.